Welcome, everyone. Today we're doing a deep dive into, well, quite a collection of writings. They all focus on this alleged hidden network, the Illuminati, and its supposed impact on world events.
That's right. And our goal here is really to unpack the core claims being made in these specific sources. We want to see what recurring themes pop up and just understand the perspective these authors are presenting.
Exactly. And just so you know what we're working with, we've got various articles, excerpts. They touch on history, societal trends, and, yeah, a lot of alleged conspiracies.
All supposedly tied together by this Illuminati group.
Right. And we should probably say up front, some of this stuff gets pretty controversial.
Definitely. So it's crucial for you to remember our aim isn't to say whether any of this is true or not.
No, not at all. We're just trying to understand the information as it's presented in these documents we've reviewed.
Okay, so where do we start? What are these sources actually claiming are the Illuminati's main goals?
Well, according to these texts, the big one, the main objective, seems to be the degradation and enslavement of humanity.
And not just in one way, right? They talk about mentally, spiritually.
And even physically, potentially, yeah. It's depicted as this really pervasive thing, not some minor influence.
So not just pulling a few strings here and there.
Apparently not. The sources accuse them of, like, systematically undermining all sorts of organizations, even ones that look good on the surface, charities, professional groups.
Including political movements, too.
Oh, across the board. They list Zionism, communism, socialism, liberalism, neoconservatism, fascism, like everything.
They're supposedly infiltrating everywhere. And the methods they allegedly use to control leaders, that's where it gets pretty disturbing.
Yeah, the descriptions are quite graphic. What do the sources claim there?
Well, the claim is they keep powerful people in line by forcing them into these deeply unsettling occult rituals.
Rituals involving what exactly?
The text describe things like human sacrifice, sexual orgies, pedophilia, rape, torture, murder, really horrific stuff.
And the idea is this creates loyalty or blackmail material.
Both, it seems. It's presented as indoctrination and a way to exert control through, having something over these powerful individuals. It paints them as inherently evil, too.
It's a very dark mechanism of alleged control. And this idea extends beyond individuals, doesn't it? To the state itself.
Yes, exactly. The sources basically argue the state, any state, is just a ruse.
A ruse. How so?
It's presented as a tool used by what they call alien bankers to manipulate everyone, the masses. They mention the make-believe face of the communist New World Order as an example.
So the idea is that no matter the political system, there are hidden hands pulling the strings.
That's the core assertion. It completely flips the script on how most people see the world working.
Now, these sources also talk about attempts to suppress this kind of information. What do they say about that?
They suggest there's a deliberate effort to keep all this hidden. They cite one specific example, a complaint reportedly made by the Canadian Jewish Congress to a Canadian Human Rights Commission.
About what?
Demanding Jewish references be removed from a website discussing these topics. The author of that site sees the complaint itself as, proof they're right.
So any pushback becomes evidence for the conspiracy in that view.
Kind of, yeah. It's a self-sealing logic in a way.
And is there a bigger picture, a sort of master plan described?
Yes, they talk about this alleged master plan. It involves replacing real leaders with caricatures of government.
Caricatures, meaning puppets.
Essentially, yeah. Leaders chosen from the mob who are easily manipulated. Puppet creatures, as one source puts it.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. A big chunk of this material focuses on the supposed role of organized Jewry and Zionism. This is obviously very sensitive territory.
Extremely. We need to be really precise here, just reporting what the texts claim.
Agreed. So what's the central claim?
The core assertion is that organized Jewry is, wittingly or unwittingly, a tool in this long-term satanic agenda run by the Illuminati.
And they make a distinction, right, between ordinary Jewish people and this organized Jewry.
Yes, that's crucial. They explicitly say it's like blaming all Italians for the mafia. They argue it's wrong to hold all Jews responsible for what they claim a specific group is doing.
So they're targeting a specific subset with these accusations.
Correct. And specifically, they claim Zionism is controlled by the Order of the Illuminati,
Which they describe as?
a group of dynastic families, generational Satanists. They mention the Rothschilds, European aristocracy, all supposedly linked by money, marriage, and Freemasonry.
Freemasonry again. which they link to Kabbalism.
Yes, they often use those terms interchangeably or connect them directly in these sources.
And what's the alleged goal of this Illuminati-controlled Zionism?
The sources accuse Zionists of pushing for conflicts like attacks on Iran, but as part of a bigger game.
A game to do what?
To ultimately dismantle Western civilization and clear the path for a new world order.
Where do they trace the roots of this supposed cult?
They point to the historical Sabbatean Frankist movement. They describe it as a Satanic Jewish heresy. That's supposedly the origin.
There's also this claim about ordinary Jewish people being kept in the dark.
Right. The idea presented is that there's deliberate misinformation within the Jewish community itself.
How so?
It's alleged that only apologetic viewpoints get published or heard widely, while dissenters, they mentioned Norman Finkelstein as an example, get pushed out.
So the average person is given a sort of flattering, manipulated view of their own group.
That's the claim, to mask what their leaders are allegedly up to.
And the sources get into some specific theological interpretations too, don't they?
They do. One view, attributed to Israel Shamir, described as a Jewish convert to Christianity, is that Judaism aims to have Jews replace Christ as the go-between for God and humanity.
That's a very specific theological argument. Anything else?
Yeah, they also suggest that Jewish messianism, focusing on an earthly paradise, replaces the idea of spiritual salvation, and that the Jewish Holocaust is positioned to overshadow the suffering of others in WWII, almost replacing the passion of Christ in significance.
Wow. Okay, that's definitely controversial reading.
Yeah.
Let's move to Freemasonry itself, as it keeps coming up.
Right. So Freemasonry in these writings is often described as Judaism for Gentiles. Meaning it's supposedly based on the Kabbalah and acts as the executive political organ for the Jewish financial elite.
And they claim there's a hierarchy within it.
Yes. They assert that Masonic Jews run the show. And while non-Jews are in many lodges, they're supposedly barred from specifically Jewish ones, like B'nai B'rith, which they call the executive branch.
Do they use any historical figures or documents to back this?
They quote Pope Leo XIII, who called Freemasonry the permanent personification of the revolution, fighting God and the church.
Okay.
And they quote another expert who supposedly said Freemasonry is like a net used to catch people for subversive ends, often without them even realizing it.
Innocent people used as agents.
That's the idea. They also mention a supposed agreement back in 1781 to merge the Illuminati hierarchy into Freemasonry.
So connecting all these secret societies together. Yeah. And the end goal of all this alleged manipulation is the New World Order. How do they picture that?
It's painted as this fundamental attempt to, overthrow God and put Satan in charge. A complete inversion of good and evil.
And humanity's role in that.
To be re-engineered into serfs, basically a neo-feudal world. The sources suggest the architects know people have a spiritual hunger, but they just offer, worthless distractions instead. Shiny baubles.
There was also something about blaming all Jews being part of the plan.
Yeah, that's another claim. That the NWO will deliberately blame all Jews for the actions of this alleged elite group as a kind of strategic deception, a ruse.
And the ultimate goal of that is?
To destroy connections, your connection to your nation, to religion or God, to race, to family. Break all those bonds.
Yeah, it's a sweeping vision of societal dismantling. So let's pivot to history. How do these sources tie specific historical events to this alleged Illuminati plot?
Oh, they see its hand everywhere. The founding of the Federal Reserve in 1913 is a big one.
How so?
They claim it wasn't federal at all, but foreign-controlled banks taking over U.S. currency.
And World War I.
Seen as deliberately engineered to increase debt, cripple Europe, and crucially, establish communism in Russia and Zionism in Palestine, both supposedly key goals for these bankers.
Even U.S. involvement in World War II.
Framed as being necessary to save communism. Yeah. So yeah, the argument is this influence consistently works to destabilize things and create openings for control.
It's certainly a radical reinterpretation of major historical events.
Yeah.
What else do they point to?
All sorts of things. Some seem quite disparate, like Al Gore's daughter marrying Jacob Schiff's grandson is cited as evidence of elite mingling.
Okay.
They also talk about historical wealth concentration, claiming that by 1864, global wealth was already in the hands of Jewish capitalists in London.
And sponsorship of certain movements.
Yes, they attribute the sponsorship of communism, non-European immigration, even the NAACP in the U.S. to Jewish influence. Even things like the positive portrayal of Jewish characters in shows like All in the Family is seen as part of this agenda.
And the big revolutions, like the Russian Revolution.
Absolutely central. The Bolshevik Revolution is described as an expression of the Jewish egregore, this sort of collective entity they imply aiming for world dominion, replacing God.
Egregore. That's an interesting term they use. And specific atrocities.
The Holodomor famine in Ukraine is blamed on the Bolsheviks, with the claim most key players were Jewish. The whole revolution is seen as rejecting traditional morals, aligning with Luciferian permissiveness.
Specific U.S. events, too.
Yeah. The Owen Glass bill, Woodrow Wilson's election in 1913 seen as key steps.
And international bodies, the UN, League of Nations.
Viewed as banker projects for world government. Fast forward, they talk about a stealth communist takeover of the USA, pointing to figures like alleged KGB generals in Homeland Security or Michael Chertoff heading it.
Even the War on Terror.
Framed as a tool for population control. The idea being once Islam is controlled, the focus shifts to the West.
And 9/11 itself.
Alleged to be instigated by the elite. It's a narrative that weaves together so many different threads.
It really is. They even mention things like that seed bank in Norway.
Yeah, presented as a contingency for nuclear war, the Balfour Declaration gets linked to the Russian Revolution and the U.S. entering WWI.
And the protocols of the Elders of Zion. Still relevant in these texts.
Very much so. They don't dismiss it as a hoax. They claim it's a genuine plan for world domination by a king from David's bloodline.
So communism and Zionism are seen as
twin brothers, basically. Both satanic movements working towards a global dictatorship, a neo-feudal one.
And finance is always the engine behind this.
Constantly emphasize. Wall Street Jewish bankers accused of funding both sides in the world wars.
They even question the Holocaust.
Some sources raise the possibility it was staged to manipulate Jews, grant them moral impunity, and advance the NWO by undermining nationalism, except Jewish nationalism, of course.
That's an incredibly controversial claim. What about events in the Middle East?
The 1948 war in Palestine is called a phony war, a cover for expelling Palestinians. They accuse Zionists of false flag attacks like against Iraqi Jews, or bombing U.S. places in Cairo, the USS Liberty incident, and running a protection racket.
And even things like presidential assassination.
Allegations of Illuminati involvement pop up there, too. And the Cambridge 5 spy ring, they specifically mention Nathaniel Meyer, Victor Rothschild's alleged role.
It seems almost no major event or figure is left untouched. Even the 1940 U.S. election.
Yeah, the lack of an anti-war candidate is blamed on British, presumably meaning Illuminati, influence.
And some claims are, well, pretty out there, like about Hitler.
Yes, the assertion that Hitler was homosexual, trained in England, and that WWII itself is a kind of charade.
The charade. To what end?
The view presented is that after WWI, the plan was for Anglo-Saxons, heavily influenced by their Jewish elements, the central bankers, to run the world.
They mentioned Churchill being aware of bombings.
Yeah, where they'd happen, using them to solidify support. Also, U.S. corporations investing in Nazi Germany during the war.
So the overarching theme is that history as we know it is a lie.
A hoax, as one source puts it, orchestrated by Cabalist central bankers aiming for tyranny. FDR is called a quarterback, controlled by these financiers.
And that egregore concept comes up again.
Yes, with communism expressing the Jewish egregore seeking world dominion, even the Koch brothers get pulled in. Their role is supposedly to frame politics as left versus right, which is seen as a disguise for the real power structure.
And Congress.
The claim is made that most members belong to a satanic secret society, the Freemasons.
So the bankers created communism.
To harness the working class, yes, for their own goal of world dictatorship.
Even figures like Rosa Parks or Nelson Mandela are viewed differently.
Described as serving a communist Illuminati agenda, it really reframes everything.
The Cristero Rebellion in Mexico?
Framed as resistance against Judeo-Masonic tyranny. They allege CIA domestic assassination programs exist, controlled by the same Masonic Jewish banking cartel.
The Korean War.
Presented as an Illuminati effort to boost the UN's power.
And back to 9/11, the claim about no planes.
Yes, that no planes actually hit the Twin Towers or the Pentagon, and the media was complicit.
The death of Amschel Rothschild is also mentioned.
In 1996, yes. Called suspicious, with alleged suppression of any real inquiry.
The core idea seems to be a spiritual battle too, right? Society rejecting God leads to embracing Satan.
Exactly, with Freemasonry as a key vehicle for that transition. They mention alleged satanic rituals at places like Bohemian Grove.
And even things aimed at youth, like We Day.
Described as Illuminati
And
brainwashing.
they also touch on cultural decline
Yes, things like the decline of grammar are seen as deliberate dumbing down, part of cultural decadence.
and modern education.
Accused of focusing on grooming youth for gay sex instead of teaching useful skills.
Television.
Called a satanic family altar, spreading a new satanic religion into homes.
And the Illuminati Jews themselves are characterized how?
As Luciferians, reversing good and evil, preaching rebellion, spreading dysfunction.
They analyze movies, too.
Yeah, looking for what they call socially destructive agitprop, promoting promiscuity, attacking traditional family structures, often highlighting Jewish directors.
Even a specific miniseries.
The way we live now is interpreted as showing traditional values being overthrown by Jewish finance.
And the mainstreaming of homosexuality.
Seen as an Illuminati imposition, an attack on heterosexuality. They contrast this with, interestingly, Japanese children's cartoons, which they praise as uplifting art.
There are also direct quotes about Jewish financiers controlling the world.
Yes, and claims about Rothschild influence even extending to the Vatican.
It's such a comprehensive, albeit disturbing, narrative. What about Edmund Rothschild?
His role is interpreted in a bizarre drama where his successor becomes the Antichrist, a process supposedly requiring a Holocaust and the return of Jews to Palestine.
So history is just an occult plan unfolding.
That's the assertion. Driven by Cabalist bankers using war, revolution, financial collapse as tools. The Protocols of Zion are mentioned again, world government by a Davidic king.
British and American imperialism fit in how?
As extensions of this Cabalist Jew world order.
And WWII leaders again. Hitler.
Alleged to be Illuminati agents, serving the Rothschild syndicate. The Treaty of Rapallo between Germany and Soviet Russia, seen as Illuminati-directed preparation for the next war.
They claim communists helped the Nazis.
Yes, helped them get into power, and that the U.S. gave the Soviets atomic bomb secrets during WWII.
Did Hitler test nuclear bombs?
That claim is made too.
The sources also contrast the Bolsheviks' actions towards churches and synagogues.
Right, pointing out churches were destroyed while synagogues weren't, and alleging Jewish dominance in the Cheka, the secret police.
Cabalist Judaism is seen as the template.
For communism and the NWO, yes. Control the banks, then you control corporations, media, education. You shape reality.
Belladad is mentioned, the ex-communist.
Yes, her account of communists infiltrating society by becoming liberals, feminists, socialists is cited as evidence of subversion tactics.
And the language used by the supposed NWO piece? Tolerance.
Dismissed as unconvincing lies given the alleged communist and fascist roots.
There's a mention of Western elites having a death wish.
Yes, with firearms ownership by citizens presented as a key obstacle to their plans.
And gay rights is framed how?
As a mask for an attack on heterosexual identity, aiming to replace heterosexual norms entirely.
Sex education gets scrutinized too.
Accused of being designed by predators to normalize what they call perversion. They cite examples of alleged bias promoting homosexuality in schools and media.
There are also claims about the British establishment and pedophilia.
Yes, that it's common practice, mentioning figures like Jimmy Savile, and that the Illuminati promote things like bestiality, furries.
Homosexuality itself is described as
A disorder caused by upbringing, not innate. They reference Elizabeth Dilling's interpretation of the Talmud as teaching immorality.
even the NSA gets a mention.
Its secret funding by the CIA is used as another example of hidden control structures.
What about art? What role should it play, according to these sources?
It should address this occult cancer they believe is destroying society.
The normalization of sexual perversion seems like a really central theme for them.
Absolutely. It's presented as a key Illuminati strategy. Society itself is described as satanically possessed.
And Judaism is equated with.
A satanic cult in disguise, defined by the Kabbalah and Talmud, which are claimed to be inherently satanic.
Freud is brought in too.
Yes, alleged to be a Sabbatean who spread perverted beliefs disguised as science.
And the Masonic system again. How does it control things?
Through gathering information on everyone, blackmail, manipulating professions, lawyers, doctors, police, politicians.
Is there any mention of historical resistance?
They point to an 1882 anti-Jewish conference as maybe the last big effort to defend Christian national values against this perceived threat.
Even corporate logos are analyzed.
Yeah, looking for hidden occult symbols like crescent moons.
And the undermining of Christianity.
claim to happen through funding seminaries, promoting higher criticism to question the Bible, and the social gospel to shift focus away from traditional faith.
They link social trends like teenage sex to divorce rates.
Yes, and childlessness among educated women all tied back to this alleged Satanist agenda to break down society.
Denial of gender.
Seen as denying reality, pure and simple. They cite scientific differences between male and female brains.
The Enlightenment gets a negative spin, too.
Portrayed as the start of this Illuminati project to re-engineer humanity, replacing God with humanism. Comte, the father of sociology, is seen as representing the totalitarian aims of social sciences.
There's a concept of redemption through sin.
Within Kabbalism, yes, the idea being that creating chaos will force the Messiah, who they see as the Antichrist, to appear. Also, this Kabbalist belief about restoring divine unity through a sexual union of deities, though they note some Jewish sources dismiss that as nonsense.
Wow. Okay. We've covered a huge amount of ground here, really delving into the specific and often quite unsettling perspective presented in these particular sources about the Illuminati.
It's definitely a complex and, as we've said, highly controversial worldview.
So just to reiterate as we wrap up, we've explored the claims and the themes that emerge from these specific documents. We haven't been endorsing any of it.
Absolutely not. These writings put forward a very wide-ranging narrative that challenges, well, pretty much all conventional understanding of history, power, and society.
We really encourage you, the listener, to take this information, think about it critically, and definitely do your own research if any of these topics sparked your interest.
Which leads us to a final thought for you to consider. Given these claims we've discussed, claims of hidden control, manipulation across history, culture, finance, religion, what areas do you think are most important for individuals, for you, to really examine and try to understand more deeply, both in your own life and maybe in the wider world as well?